1999 was all about Mika Hakkinen, McLaren, and the fight for the championship. But down at the very back of the grid, a stranger walked in claiming to be a Nigerian prince with $125 million to save a dying team. What followed wasn't a comeback. It was one of the strangest scams Formula One has ever seen. Before the so-called prince ever set foot in the paddock, Arrows had already been living on the edge for over 2 decades. Founded in 1978, they were the scrappy underdog of Formula One. Never title contenders, rarely front-row starters, but somehow always there when the lights went out. They pulled off the occasional podium, even won pole position, and had flashes of genuine speed. But those moments were scattered like loose change in a couch. Most of the time, they were fighting tooth and nail just to stay in the midfield, a survival story written one race at a time. The early 90s looked like a turning point. A Japanese company called Footwork came in swinging, buying a hefty stake in the team, pouring in fresh cash, and even renaming the outfit Footwork Arrows. The rebrand wasn't just cosmetic. It felt like they might actually have the resources to climb the order. For a brief moment, the future didn't seem like a cliff edge. But motorsport dreams are fragile, and in Formula One, they can shatter in the blink of an eye. When Japan's economy nosedived in the mid-90s, Footwork's once endless supply of funding shrank to a trickle. The big-ticket sponsorship deals that had once seemed untouchable started falling apart. Suppliers who had been eager to work with the team began tightening their terms, and every promise of investment came with a new layer of hesitation. By the time the dust finally settled, Footwork had quietly backed out of team ownership altogether. For a short while, their logo still clung to the Arrows cars, almost like a ghost of better days. But the reality was obvious to anyone in the paddock. The money had dried up completely. Without that steady flow of cash, Arrows was left right back where they'd started, underfunded, overstretched, and trying to act like a frontline competitor while operating on a budget smaller than what Ferrari probably spent on espresso beans. Team founder Jackie Oliver, who had been there from the very beginning, was forced to step back into the trenches. His role became part crisis manager, part miracle worker, and part debt negotiator. He worked the phones constantly, calling in old favors from friends in the sport, chasing every possible sponsor lead, and squeezing suppliers for the best possible deals. It was a daily exercise in survival. Mechanics and engineers were asked to make parts last longer than they should. Travel budgets were slashed. Updates to the car were delayed or quietly shelved altogether. Every decision was weighed not just in lap time, but in how much it would cost to make happen. It wasn't glamorous work. It was more like patching holes in a sinking ship, knowing another wave was already on the horizon. But Oliver kept the team afloat against all odds, running on grit, resourcefulness, and stubborn pride. And as Arrows was about to find out, Walkinshaw's first big move was the kind of gamble you only make when you're certain you can beat the odds. When Tom Walkinshaw took over Arrows in 1996, the paddock expected something bold. This was a man who'd made his name winning races in touring cars and running successful sports car programs. A guy with a sharp business brain and a taste for high-stakes moves. And sure enough, his first big decision as Arrows boss wasn't to invest in a new wind tunnel, hire top-tier engineers, or chase a better engine deal. Nope. He went shopping for a superstar driver. Not just any driver. Damon Hill, the reigning Formula One world champion. On paper, it looked like the coup of the decade. The defending champ dropping into a midfield team? Headlines wrote themselves. But while the newspapers were salivating, the accountants were quietly sweating. Hill wasn't cheap. His salary punched a hole in the budget big enough to drive a team truck through. And the money to patch it up had to come from somewhere. That somewhere turned out to be everywhere else. Car development, staffing, upgrades. The gamble nearly paid off, though. At the 1997 Hungarian Grand Prix, Hill put the Arrows in the lead. Yes, the lead. For lap after lap, he held off faster cars, the stuff of underdog legend. And then, on lap 76 of 77, a gearbox problem struck. The win evaporated in seconds, leaving Hill crawling home in second place. It was still a miracle result, but for Walkinshaw, it was also a reminder that miracles don't fix balance sheets. The rest of Hill's stint with Arrows was less fairy tale and more grind. The car's pace wasn't there. The reliability was shaky. and the momentum faded fast. By the end of '97, Hill had seen enough. He left, taking a chunk of the team's credibility with him. Sponsors followed him out the door. Walkinshaw tried to fill the gap with pay drivers, the kind who bring a suitcase of sponsor cash to secure a seat. It kept the lights on but didn't do much for performance. The 1998 season was forgettable at best, another slow bleed of points, money, and morale. By the time 1999 rolled around, Arrows wasn't looking for a driver to save them or an engineer to reinvent the car. They needed something far more basic, a financial lifeline big enough to keep the team alive. And that's when a certain Nigerian prince appeared, offering a deal too good to be true. It was early 1999, and Arrow's finances were looking about as healthy as a blown engine on lap one. Two major sponsors had walked away over the winter, and the budget was leaking from every possible corner. Walkinshaw and the management team weren't just looking for investment. They were looking for a miracle. That's when he appeared, Prince Malik Ado Ibrahim, tall, confident, and armed with a promise big enough to make even the most cynical team boss lean forward in his chair. $125 million. That's right, 9 figures, ready to be pumped into Arrows to secure 25% of the team, and, in theory, its future. He claimed to be a royal from Nigeria's Igbira people. Not exactly Buckingham Palace, but a title nonetheless. According to Malik, he'd grown up in the UK, attended elite schools, and, just to spice things up, once raced at the 24 Hours of Le Mans under a fake name. Whether any of it was true, well, no one seemed all that interested in finding out. When you're broke, you don't check a gift horse's passport. Malik's personal stamp on Arrows came in the form of a mysterious new brand, T-. Slick logo, intriguing name, zero explanation. He called it a lifestyle empire in the making, a company that would sell everything from t-shirts and energy drinks to bicycles and Lamborghinis. To hear him describe it, it was going to be the next global powerhouse. To everyone else, it sounded like the ramblings of a man pitching 5 different businesses at once. Still, Arrows didn't press. They had new investment partners, a flashy brand to display, and the faint scent of a comeback in the air. If Malik was for real, maybe, just maybe, this was the start of something big. When the covers came off the Arrows A20 for the 1999 season, the first thing everyone noticed wasn't the drivers, or the car's shape, or even the bright new sponsor logos. It was this sleek, black and white emblem splashed across the side pods, T-. Nobody knew what it meant, but it looked like it belonged. Clean, bold, mysterious. It was the kind of logo you could imagine on a luxury watch or a nightclub. At the official reveal, Prince Malik finally pulled back the curtain on the mystery. T-, he declared, wasn't just another sponsor. It was going to be a global lifestyle brand. He painted a picture so big it could barely fit on the side of the car. Clothing lines with sleek designs, energy drinks to rival Red Bull, high-performance bicycles, roaring motorbikes, and at the top of the pyramid, exclusive high-end Lamborghinis with the T- badge. This wasn't just a brand to him. It was a movement, a cultural phenomenon in the making that would somehow catapult Arrows beyond the boundaries of Formula One and into the everyday lives of consumers around the world. And naturally, the profits from this juggernaut would bankroll his $125 million stake in the team. It was an impressive pitch, the kind that could make you forget to ask any hard questions. But there was one glaring problem. None of it existed. Not a single item in production. No website to click on. No factory producing merchandise. No distribution network. There wasn't even a glossy brochure to hand out. All that existed was a slick logo, a vague countdown timer, and Malik's almost magical ability to talk about it as if it were already a billion-dollar empire. The timing almost made sense. This was 1999. The internet existed, but Amazon was still a bookshop. E-commerce wasn't mainstream, and no one had really used F1 as a launchpad for a consumer brand before. In a strange way, Malik was ahead of his time. But there's a difference between being visionary and being imaginary, and T- was very much the latter. The paddock reaction was split. Some thought it was bold and innovative. Others thought it smelled fishier than a Monaco seafood market in July. But Arrows? They didn't have the luxury of skepticism. They needed Malik to be real, so they treated T- like the real deal. The logo was painted proudly, the press releases were enthusiastic, and nobody asked too many questions. Meanwhile, back in the garage, the reality was much less glamorous. The A20 was basically last year's chassis with a new paint job and the same underpowered Hart V10 engine bolted in. It looked fast sitting still, but there wasn't a single engineer who thought it was about to challenge Ferrari or McLaren. Still, if T- was going to fund the future, maybe, just maybe, they could hang on long enough for that promised $125 million to land. The season opener in Melbourne was the first real test for the new Arrows, and for about 2 hours, it actually looked like they might be onto something. Pedro de la Rosa crossed the line in 6th place, scoring a championship point, with teammate Toranosuke Takagi right behind in 7th. For a backmarker team, that was cause for celebration. But here's the fine print. Only 8 cars finished that race. The rest of the grid was scattered around the track in various states of mechanical collapse. Arrows hadn't suddenly built a rocket ship. They'd just managed to keep the wheels on while everyone else fell apart. A point is still a point, but deep down, they knew it wasn't a sign of a miracle turnaround. Then came Brazil. De La Rosa's car didn't even make it to the end, retiring with mechanical problems. Takagi crossed the line in 8th, 1 spot outside the points. But again, it was more about survival than speed. The truth was hard to ignore. The A20 was slow, the Hart engine was underpowered, and reliability was shaky at best. As the season unfolded, Arrows found themselves locked in a grim battle with Minardi for the title of least worst team on the grid. Some weekends, they'd scrape into the midfield during qualifying, only to slip backwards when the lights went out. Other weekends, it was all about making it to the checkered flag at all. And through it all, the T- logos kept gleaming on the car, as if mocking the whole situation. The grand lifestyle brand was still just a logo and a pitch. No website, no product launch, no revenue. Malik kept talking up its potential, but every week that passed made it harder to believe. Inside the team, morale was mixed. The engineers and mechanics were busting themselves to squeeze whatever performance they could out of the car, while management was quietly wondering if that promised $125 million was ever going to show up. On the outside, rival teams and the press were starting to whisper, was Prince Malik the real deal, or just a very well-dressed fantasy? By mid-season, the whispers would turn into something much louder, because the truth about Malik and his money was about to come crashing down. By the halfway point of 1999, the paddock chatter had shifted from the usual gossip about driver moves and technical upgrades to a more awkward question. Had Prince Malik actually paid anything? People had been patient. Big investments can take time to process after all. But months had passed, and there was still no sign of the promised $125 million. Then, just as the rumors started gaining traction, Malik himself vanished. One race weekend he was there, smiling for cameras and talking about the bright future of T-. The next? Gone. No paddock appearances, no interviews, no press statements. It was as if someone had switched him off. By August, the situation was impossible to ignore. The September deadline for his payment loomed, and everyone inside Arrows knew the truth. The money wasn't coming. When the date passed, it became official. Malik had ghosted Formula One. The grand investment, the big plans, the mysterious brand, all smoke. For Walkinshaw, it was a disaster. He had to buy back the 25% stake Malik had promised to pay for, dipping further into an already strained budget. The months spent working with Malik, building around the idea of a massive cash injection, had been wasted. Time, energy, and resources that could have gone into making the car faster had instead gone into chasing a mirage. Morale in the garage hit rock bottom. The mechanics and engineers still pushed to get the car to every race, but the optimism that had floated around after Melbourne was gone. Now, every weekend felt like damage control, trying to finish races, avoid last place, and keep the team alive for the next round. Outside the team, Malik's disappearance became one of the juiciest stories of the year. Rival bosses shrugged knowingly, the media had a field day, and fans were left wondering how something so blatant had slipped through without more questions being asked. The consensus? Desperation makes you believe things you'd normally laugh off. Arrows closed out 1999 with just a single point, that lonely score from Australia, and a reputation for having been duped. But the real damage wasn't in the standings. It was in the trust they'd placed in a man who turned out to be all promise and no proof. Arrows limped into the year 2000 carrying the baggage of Malik's Vanishing act. The $125 million that never arrived had left a crater in their finances. But somehow, Walkinshaw wasn't ready to fold. The team secured a new engine deal with Supertech, landed a major title sponsor in Orange, and rolled out a chassis that was, for once, genuinely respectable. It paid off, sort of. They scored 7 points across the season, which for a team like Arrows felt like winning the lottery. In a midfield packed with seasoned competitors, even those handful of points gave them something to smile about. But under the surface, the scars from 1999 were still raw. The debts hadn't vanished, and the extra sponsorship money was more like a bandage on a broken arm. By 2001, reality caught up again. Reliability problems returned, performance wobbled, and the team's financial position was still on shaky ground. Then came the biggest headache yet. Morgan Grenfell, the very investment group Malik had brought into the team, filed a lawsuit. Their accusation? Arrows had changed the terms of the deal after taking their money. It was yet another distraction for a team that couldn't afford any more. Court battles drained attention and resources, while the on-track results began sliding backwards again. In 2002, the House of Cards finally collapsed. The debts were too heavy, the lawsuits too messy, and the sponsorship too thin. Midway through the season, Arrows simply didn't show up to a race. By the end of the year, they were gone, bankrupt after 25 years in Formula One. It was a bitter end for a team that had outlasted so many others in the sport. At one point, they'd been the 11th most experienced team in F1 history, a constant presence on the grid even if they weren't frontrunners. But all it took was one fake promise, months of chasing an illusion, and a string of bad financial breaks to push them over the edge. For the fans who'd followed Arrows since the late 70s, the collapse wasn't just sad, it was frustrating. This wasn't a team beaten purely by bad engineering or slow cars. It was a team undone by misplaced trust and the wrong gamble at the wrong time. When Arrows folded in 2002, you might think Prince Malik would quietly disappear into obscurity, never to be seen again in motorsport circles. But if there's one thing Malik seemed good at, it was reappearing in unexpected places. In 2008, his name popped up again, this time in a Texas courtroom. The case? He was accused of misusing funds that were supposed to help a young NASCAR driver, Robert Richardson Jr., advance his career. Malik denied the allegations, and in the end, he was cleared of those specific charges. But his time in court wasn't over just yet. He faced separate perjury charges for allegedly lying during the legal process, and he couldn't leave jail without posting $35,000 in bail. After that, Malik shifted into a different gear. His career turned into a revolving door of vague-sounding business ventures, renewable energy companies, digital media outfits, investment firms, each described in enough buzzwords to make a corporate handbook blush, but with very little in the way of tangible proof or public track records. He also resurfaced in the public eye in 2023, this time as a political candidate. Running for president of Nigeria under the Young Progressives Party, he made a splash in local and international media, even giving a TED Talk during his campaign. The result? He didn't win. But in true Malik style, he made sure people remembered his name. Today, according to his own profile, Malik is the head of an investment firm called Negus International, which claims to focus on infrastructure and sustainable development projects in Africa. Whether it's the real deal or another ambitious vision that exists mostly on paper, well, history gives us plenty of reason to be cautious. What's certain is that Malik's brief, chaotic stint in Formula One left behind one of the sport's strangest stories. A tale of promises that never materialized, a mysterious brand that never existed, and a team that bet their future on a man who vanished when it mattered most. If you enjoyed this story, hit the like button, subscribe for more, and drop a comment telling me which F1 mystery you think I should cover next.